What if a single inspection could shut down an entire gold mining camp overnight? The air hung heavy with dust and tension as Tony Beets stood by the sluice boxes, the roar of water masking the unease creeping into the camp. Suddenly, the unexpected arrived, a surprise environmental audit, unannounced and unforgiving. Inspectors appeared like shadows, cameras in hand, eyes sharp for any sign of violation. Their first move was to present an inspection report, a dry piece of paper that would soon ripple through the camp like wildfire. The report was precise, observations logged, photographs of a suspicious spill documented. A dark stain on the earth beside a key valve was unmistakable. Tony's jaw clenched as he studied the images. The inspectors' voices were calm but firm. This spill violated regulations and carried hefty fines. The camp's operations were at stake, and every miner's livelihood trembled on a knife's edge. How could a single valve's leak threaten months of hard work and millions in gold? Inside the cramped office trailer, Tony rubbed his temples, frustration etching deep lines across his face. The spill was real, but Tony knew something wasn't adding up. This valve was brand new, installed just weeks ago by a supplier they trusted implicitly. He couldn't ignore the possibility that this might be a failure beyond their control. Yet, admitting fault now risked shutting down the entire operation while fines piled up. The question lingered: was this a simple mistake, or a calculated oversight? Outside, the camp buzzed with whispers. Miners exchanged anxious glances over lunch tables, eyes darting toward the inspection team, who moved methodically from site to site. Heavy boots crunched over gravel as inspectors snapped more photos, their cameras flashing like lightning strikes against the dull gray of machinery. Tony paced back and forth near the sluice boxes, each step echoing his mounting anxiety. What if this inspection wasn't just routine? What if it was the beginning of something far worse? Then came an unexpected development. A detailed engineering report arrived late one afternoon. The camp gathered around as Tony unfolded the pages, scanning graphs and technical jargon that seemed almost indecipherable to most. But one thing was clear: the valve failure wasn't due to negligence at the camp. It traced back to a design flaw from the supplier. A small defect had allowed contaminants to seep through under pressure, causing the spill caught on camera. This revelation shifted everything. The inspectors reconvened with new evidence in hand, their tones softening as they reviewed the engineering findings. The initial fine transformed into a mandate for corrective action, a plan to replace faulty valves and implement stricter monitoring protocols. Relief rippled through the camp like a sudden breeze breaking a stifling heat wave. But beneath that relief lurked new questions. How deep did this supplier's failure run? Could it happen again? Tony watched as crews mobilized swiftly, replacing valves and installing barriers designed to prevent future spills. The camp seemed to breathe again, machinery humming at full capacity, water coursing through channels without interruption. Yet Tony's gaze remained distant. He knew this wasn't just about fixing equipment. It was about safeguarding an entire way of life against unseen threats. As evening fell over the rugged landscape, shadows stretched long across battered trailers and yellow excavators resting idle under fading light. The inspectors packed up their gear, leaving behind a camp both scarred and strengthened by scrutiny. Tony lit a cigarette outside his office, inhaling deeply as smoke curled into the cooling air. Could one inspection truly protect what mattered most? Or did it merely expose cracks, waiting to widen under pressure? What happens next remains uncertain. Will vigilance hold, or will hidden dangers resurface? For now, Tony's camp stands ready to face whatever comes, but questions echo in every corner. How fragile is success when weighed against nature's strict demands? And can trust ever be fully restored once doubt seeps in like poison? Stay tuned to discover how this battle between man and environment unfolds, And what sacrifices lie ahead when survival hangs by such a slender thread? Are you ready to witness resilience tested beyond limits? Keep watching to find out what happens when gold mining meets its toughest inspection yet. The sudden knock at the camp's makeshift door shattered the tense silence. Tony Beets barely had time to react before two inspectors stepped inside, cameras in hand, eyes sharp and unyielding. A surprise audit, right in the middle of extraction, was the last thing anyone wanted. The air was thick with dust and diesel fumes, but now it carried something heavier: suspicion. As the lead inspector unfurled a crisp sheet of paper, Tony's jaw tightened. The act of inspection lay before them, filled with detailed observations and damning photographs, capturing a spill near the sluice box. Bright yellowish sludge oozed over the rocks, staining everything in sight. The camera clicks echoed like a countdown ticking toward disaster. Tony's gaze locked on the photos, each one a freeze frame of negligence or misfortune. It was hard to tell which. The inspectors spoke in clipped tones about violations, citing environmental codes that seemed suddenly insurmountable. Tony could feel his crew's eyes darting around nervously. Every breath felt heavier, every sound magnified: the low hum of machinery, the scrape of boots against gravel. But just as the tension peaked, a new voice broke through. The camp's engineer emerged from a corner, clutching a thick report. He handed it over without a word, eyes flickering between Tony and the inspectors. The room fell silent again as the lead inspector scanned its pages. The report detailed a critical failure. A valve supplied by an external provider had malfunctioned at a crucial moment. It was not human error nor careless oversight, but a mechanical defect beyond their control. Suddenly the narrative shifted. The inspectors' stern expressions softened slightly as they exchanged glances. This revelation flipped the script entirely. Instead of facing immediate fines and possible shutdowns, Tony negotiated to replace penalties with corrective measures, a plan to mitigate damage and prevent future leaks. The engineers outlined specific steps: reinforce containment barriers, daily valve inspections, and improve drainage systems. As cameras continued to document every move, Tony paced slowly near the sluice box, fingers trailing along cold metal pipes stained by sediment. His mind raced through worst-case scenarios, while his body betrayed no sign of panic. He knew this wasn't over. Regulators were watching closely now. Outside, wind picked up dust into swirling columns that danced across the camp's rugged terrain. Somewhere in that chaos lay the fine line between survival and shutdown, a line Tony was determined not to cross. But what if this valve failure wasn't an isolated incident? What if systemic problems lurked beneath the surface? The plan's implementation began immediately under watchful eyes. Crews fortified embankments with heavy rocks and plastic liners. Technicians inspected every valve multiple times per shift. Tension simmered beneath forced smiles, and briefings held under fading daylight. Yet shadows lengthened not only from setting sun but from whispers among workers, rumors that some equipment might be outdated or improperly maintained despite assurances otherwise. Tony caught snippets of hushed conversations as he passed. "Did you hear about the last inspection? They say this one could shut us down for good." Those words clung like cold sweat on his skin. One evening, as Tony stood by the edge of the camp, watching the river's murky flow, his phone buzzed with an incoming message, a cryptic alert from an insider warning about an upcoming environmental review that promised even stricter scrutiny than before. The timing couldn't be worse. His reflection flickered in dark waters below, fractured yet defiant. He inhaled sharply, feeling how fragile their grip on operations had become. Could he steer through this storm without losing everything? Was there more at stake than just fines and repairs? The camp settled into uneasy routine, while outside forces tightened their grip like unseen hands, squeezing harder each day. The next moves would determine whether this mining operation survived or collapsed under mounting pressure. For now, Tony's focus narrowed to one question burning louder than any engine noise. How deep did this problem really go? And who else might be hiding behind those valves? Keep watching to discover what happens when suspicion turns into investigation, and consequences spiral beyond control. What would you do if everything you built was on the line? Stay tuned for what comes next. This story is far from over. A sudden knock echoed through the camp, sharp and urgent, slicing through the usual hum of machinery. Tony Beets barely had time to react before a stern voice demanded immediate access for an environmental inspection. The tension was palpable. Every eye flickered toward the entrance, knowing this surprise audit could threaten everything they'd built. The inspector's clipboard was already filled with notes and photos of a recent spill near the dredging site. The camera flash briefly illuminated dark stains on the gravel, oil slicks that whispered of negligence. Tony's jaw tightened as he listened to the preliminary findings. Violations were listed, heavy fines hinted at, and worse, a shutdown threatened. How could this happen now, in the middle of peak extraction season? The stakes had never been higher. As the inspector paced methodically around the site, Tony's mind raced. He recalled every detail, every valve replaced, every repair logged. But then came a crucial piece of evidence that shifted everything: an engineering report, detailed and precise, submitted just hours before the inspection. It pointed to a specific valve failure, one traced not to their team, but to a supplier's defective part. The valve's malfunction had caused the spill, not careless oversight or poor maintenance. This revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. The inspector's rigid posture softened as he flipped through pages of technical data and lab results confirming the fault lay upstream. Suddenly, what seemed like an inevitable fine morphed into a call for corrective action instead. The mood shifted. Tension bled out slowly as plans for mitigation took shape right before everyone's eyes. Tony watched closely as the team devised a recovery plan, mapping out steps to clean up contamination and prevent future leaks. The air smelled faintly of diesel and wet earth as workers geared up with absorbent pads and containment booms. Every gesture mattered: a hand wiping sweat from a brow, boots crunching over gravel, hushed conversations about timelines and responsibilities. This wasn't just damage control, it was survival. Yet beneath this relief lurked unease. Had the spill gone unnoticed longer, how much more harm could have been done? What if inspections turned harsher next time? These questions lingered as shadows lengthened across the camp. Tony stared out over his domain, the river glistening dark under a setting sun, and wondered if this scare was just a warning or a prelude to greater challenges. Then came another twist: an unplanned meeting with regulators who demanded immediate implementation of stricter environmental safeguards beyond just fixing that one valve. They spoke of ongoing monitoring systems, tougher waste management protocols, and mandatory staff training sessions focused on sustainability. Tony's mind raced again. These measures meant costs climbing sharply amid already tight margins. But resistance wasn't an option. The inspector made it clear: compliance was non-negotiable if operations were to continue uninterrupted. As Tony nodded reluctantly, he caught glimpses of his crew exchanging glances, some weary but determined, others anxious yet resolute. This was no longer about gold alone, but legacy and responsibility entwined in every decision made here. In the days that followed, the camp buzzed with renewed purpose. Technicians installed sensors along water lines. Supervisors conducted drills simulating emergency responses. Meetings stretched long into twilight discussing policies now etched in stone. Every small victory, the first sensor test passing, a successful cleanup milestone, felt like reclaiming ground lost to chaos. Tony himself became more hands-on than ever before. His voice firm, yet measured guided teams through new procedures, while his eyes scanned for risks invisible before. A momentary glance at his own weathered hands reminded him why this fight mattered, not just profits but protecting land that bore witness to countless seasons of toil. Still, doubts crept quietly during solitary moments by the fire pit.